Hey everybody, it's Eric with the Fahrenheit channel, and I got an aluminum 5.3 right here behind me that we're going to use on our Fairmont build. And I want to talk a little bit about DOD, which is the placement on demand that Chevrolet used on their Gen 4 5.3s. We're going to talk about what it is, and we're going to talk about how you eliminate it. Alright, so this is our Gen 4 L33. This is an aluminum 5.3 block. And this block was equipped with DOD, but I think all of the Gen 4 5.3s would have the capability of having DOD, and that's where these components come in. And I'll give you a little run through of how some of this stuff works. Now, I'm not an expert. What we have here is a stock hydraulic lifter, and this is out of this motor, but on a non-DOD cylinder. And the DOD works on 4 cylinders of the 8 that are in this motor. And what it does is the computer senses when the motor is not under load, and it essentially turns this engine into a 4-cylinder. And the way it does that is it bypasses, we'll take a look at this valley cover. Sorry if I'm jumping around, I'm not explaining it very well. But this valley cover has solenoids in it, and when the switch activates, they draw oil through these ports that match up with these ports. They draw oil off of the DOD lifters, okay? They draw oil off of the DOD lifters, and this is a DOD lifter, this is a non-DOD lifter, this is a good DOD lifter, this is a collapsed DOD lifter. So this shows you part of the problems with this system. Getting back to how it works, sorry, jumping around here. The switch in that valley cover relieves oil through these ports. It takes the oil pressure off of these lifters, takes the oil pressure off of these lifters, and the lifter has an internal sleeve you can see right on the inside of this spring. So once the oil pressure is off of this lifter, the lifter, rather than pushing under oil pressure, pushing the push rod up and letting it come down, following the cam and activating the valve, okay? Activating the rocker arm, which runs over to the valve. Alright? When it relieves the oil pressure, this spring, it counts on this spring running on the sleeve to keep it in contact with the cam, keep the roller in contact with the cam, and basically, because you've lost your valve events, because there is no oil pressure on the lifter, and the push rod is just along for the ride at this point, it's not activating the rocker arm, it deactivates that cylinder. And it may, I don't know, it may take spark away too, I don't know. But what does happen frequently with these engines, and it happened to this one, is the springs collapse. These motors are very sensitive to oil. They need healthy motor oil. So if you go without changing your motor oil for a while, these things can get sludged up and stick. Not sure that's what happened here, but obviously this spring collapsed. So this lifter probably lost contact with the cam. The spring collapses, so it's at the top of its stroke all the time, not running the push rod to activate the rocker arm, actually, activate the valve. So I had no valve events on our number one cylinder. This lifter was out of number one. So that's what happened. So there'll be a lot of motors in the junkyard with this issue. Obviously this engine was running on 7 cylinders. I don't know why. I don't know if that's why it ended up in the junkyard, but it's a likely reason, because most people aren't going to go through the trouble to tear the motor apart, diagnose it, and find the lifter in question. Okay, now what we do, since this is going to be a street and strip motor anyway, and we're not interested in DOD, we're not interested in gas mileage, we will plug these holes in these oil bypass towers, I'll call them, are already 5/16. So they're already tap drill size for a 3/8 16 set screw. So we'll go ahead and tap these 3/8 16 and bottom the set screw out in the hole and effectively disable our DOD, our oil bypass portion of the DOD. Okay, so we're going to do that. I also don't want to run this valley pan, so I'll show you the valley pan we're going to run. It's a 4/8 truck valley pan, and since the 4/8 and the 5/3 share blocks, the 4/8 didn't have DOD, and they used a different valley pan because they didn't need obviously they didn't need the solenoids for the DOD. So as an insurance, not only will we have our towers blocked off with a set screw below flush, okay, it's got to be below flush. These O-rings also serve a function of sealing the oil flow to the towers, okay. So I hope that all makes sense. So we can buy standard lifters. I'm going to replace the lifters anyway. Very common to put LS7 lifters in these things. So we're going to put new lifters all the way around. Don't have to worry about DOD. The oil pumps that are on the DOD motors are high volume oil pumps. We'll ditch that. In theory, we could continue to use a high volume oil pump, but it's going to make heat. If you can't use the volume, you're going to make heat somewhere. And there's no need to run a high volume pump without DOD. Okay, one of the other components of the DOD, bear with me, I hope I'm not making you seasick here. This is the oil pan off this motor, and you can see it's sludgy. This is a relief valve for the oil system, so that when the DOD called for it, extra oil capacity, obviously it wouldn't run through the bypass. It would be running through all those towers I showed you in the block. When that system was not activated, it needed a place for all that extra oil to go, and it would just bypass it here through this bypass valve. So if you're going to use the DOD oil pan, without the DOD, and I'm saying DOD a lot, without the system active, you can pull this relief valve and plug it or cap it, because you don't want the relief valve, especially if you're not going to run a high volume oil pump, and really there's no need to. So I happen to have an oil pan from a 4.8, which again would not have DOD components, so that's what we're going to run. Now, I hope that explains some of the DOD stuff, how we're going to eliminate it, and maybe you can educate me. I'm certainly no expert on this. I'm learning as I go. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Have any comments, feel free to leave them, and be sure to like and subscribe, and I appreciate you watching. Thanks.